Welcome to Backstage at BonJovi.com. I'm Obie O'Brien. You're going to be hearing some iconic Bon Jovi songs, different than you've ever heard them. We're calling them the 2024 mixes that were done in celebration of the 40th anniversary of Bon Jovi. You're going to get to hear some conversations between John and I when we were down in Nashville talking about this project.
Oh,
Yep.
you came to me and said there are so many alternate takes of catalog songs that no one's ever heard, including me, since the day that we did that take on any given song in the studio. And I was intrigued, but of course, as usual, not really paying attention until you compiled a list of a whole bunch of these songs and blew my mind. Because whether it's a different lyric or an instrumental part or a solo, I think that the fans are going to love this. So first of all, thank you for doing it. But, it goes all the way back to the beginning before there was a band and how Runaway had an alternate version of it. And it was a different solo.
Yep.
Right? So I'm going to just hand this part of the microphone over to you because I want to hear how you stumbled on, for instance, the Runaway alternate version.
Okay, so as you know, we've been digitizing everything from your personal locker. So that means we're going through all the tapes and listening to everything. Plus, we're putting a lot of things into Atmos. So now I'm hearing the recordings, whether it's digital or analog, over again. And you realize there's all these amazing guitar parts, vocal parts, alternate drum takes. And I'm like, this should be a show. And we have 3 versions of Runaway,
Really?
as you know. Yeah. There's the one that you recorded somewhere with just a couple guys. We have an alternate that was done at the power station. And
With the guys that recorded the record?
Roy Bittan is not playing piano on it.
Oh,
I don't know
yeah.
who is.
Really?
I don't know if it's
Frankie LaRocca?
I don't know if that's him playing drums.
Wow.
But the guitars are different, totally different. And there's no vocal. It's just your vocal on there. And you can hear some of it's off the floor because you can hear the leakage from your headphones.
So all of the singing was live off the floor, one take.
I think most of it was. You can hear where you might have punched in, just like let me do that again.
Wow.
Sure
would love to know when I hear it who it is, because there was no band yet. Unless because remember now, here's the story behind Runaway is there was no band yet, and then I took that song with a bunch of different guys and got the song on the radio. Unless we thought we should go in and re-record it with the band prior to it coming out, or if the decision had been made ultimately that it's already familiar on the radio, so why bother, and let's just record the rest of the record with the band. I don't even recall that because we're talking about 42 years ago.
Nobody knows. And it's not Tico's style of drumming, so it wasn't Teak. I mean, I even talked to the person you produced it with, Lance Quinn.
Yeah.
And he went, 40 years ago?
Yeah,
what,
right.
Are you nuts?
Yeah.
I don't remember what I did 40 minutes ago.
It's a long time ago. It's
long
42
time ago.
years ago.
But the magic about this for me is I approached it like a fan. We all sort of get a little jaded and, it's great music all the time. But I remember, here's where I really date myself, the first time I heard Taxman by the Beatles. And you heard the guy going 1, 2, and there was that noise, which at the time I didn't know what it was, but it was a tape recorder, either fast forwarding or rewinding. And I felt, they just let me see behind the curtain. So on these 2024 mixes, there's some really funny banter between people. Like I said, there's different lyrics. There's different vocal takes. There's you playing harmonica on songs that people have never heard. There's guitar solos that are different. There's sitars. There's just so much stuff. And I approached this as a fan.
Right on.
And this will give the fans a chance to see how these songs came about. And it's not like we went in and overdubbed. these parts have been on there for 40 plus years. We
Right,
went in and
these weren't
redid
enhanced now.
No.
Well, that's great.
Yep.
Well, let's start it off then with Runaway. Here is the first single off the 7800 Degrees Fahrenheit album, my favorite album of all.
Don't slag it.
I'm not slagging it.
Look, I know you love that record. It's not your favorite, but it's not like you hate it. You love it.
I mean, you know, I wrote it or co-wrote it.
That's
for God's
right.
sake, so, you know, I mean, but it wasn't my... This was the first single off of the album, and I wrote this with David Bryan. This was back in the day where if I was going to collaborate, it was going to be with David. You know, Richie never really became a primary writer until the third record. But David and I co-wrote this one. And what's different about this track?
So there's some stuff in the front. I let it go all the way to the end.
See.
And there's there's an extra little guitar part in there that no one's ever heard.
Okay.
And some stuff happens at the end.
Cool.
And you'll hear it now as you're listening to it.
This was recorded at your studio, the Warehouse in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. That we did our second album in Philly in 1985. I think it was the spring of 1985, as a matter of fact. I still remember that room very, very well. Rest in peace to the Warehouse.
Rest in peace.
Here is Only Lonely off the album, John's favorite album, 7800 Degrees Fahrenheit. Living on a Prayer 2024. How many times, how many ways, how many...
Yeah.
What can you add to this that's going to make our listeners listen?
I wasn't there for the recording of this song, but as they saw in the documentary, key change, right?
Yeah.
And then vamp, and it goes out on that.
Right.
But that's not what's on tape. Tico does a fill after you've stopped singing, and it drops back down to the original key. And there's Tico is playing Syndromes. Remember them? That lasted for a minute. Who knows?
I mean, I remember the room. I remember the recordings. I remember, you know, that key change in pre-production in Sayreville when we came up with that and just being miserable about it. But, you know, you were so fearless. You were like, of course I can do it. And at 25, you could.
And you didn't think about having to do it the rest of your life.
The rest of your life, yeah.
But, and another thing was, there, in some of the vocal blends, I found a little bit of a harmony note that I didn't hear on the original record. So that's a little bit louder. It's just, it's reimagining the whole mix plus the stuff that you find.
Yeah, that's fun. That's fun. All right. Well, here you go, folks. Obie's Hidden Treasures, Living on a Prayer, the 2024 archival mix magic. Next up is Bad Medicine from the New Jersey record, a #1 song, first single from this album. Tell me all about this version of Bad Medicine.
Well, I wanted to ask you about this.
Tell me.
Because, you know, I gave you a version of it, and in the beginning, as the band's doing the intro, there's a harmonica.
Oh.
So was it just sitting there on the music stand, and you went, I think I'll... So there's two spots. Harmonica they never heard. Then Richie sang the melody in the entire song on Talkbox.
Underneath my singing?
Yeah, and it never made it to the final mix. A break where the band would answer you now is just Richie on Talkbox, and then it's left in because he sings the melody with you on Talkbox.
Oh wow!
The entire song, and
that would have been an interesting effect underneath the vocal.
And then the solo, which everyone knows so well, is not the solo on this one. He played slide guitar for a solo.
Did it lack energy?
No. It was cool. It just was out of context of what the band was at that point.
See, he was playing a slide. I picked up a harmonica. We tried this Talkbox. So that was also part of the great discovery of making those records, is that we weren't afraid to try anything. You know, we would just try things, and you'd know if it worked or not. But They all felt good. It was just a matter of what was ultimately right. And we stuck very much to that 24-track analog approach, which is why those records still sound so good, is that they're open. They didn't allow us too many tracks.
And it's analog. And you know what?
Yeah.
You put those tapes up in the studio and they fill the room up.
They still
Not volume, just
sound.
The warmth and the thickness of the sound. Yeah.
It was the loading dock behind the drums at Little Mountain Sound in Vancouver. That's what a big part of what that sound was. And the old Neve board.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, how do you go? You got tape, you got an old Neve console, and you've got a giant loading dock with microphones for the drums.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
Yeah.
All right. Well, here's Bad Medicine with a lot of talk box and a little bit of harmonica. And another number one song for you. So I see a track here called Stick to Your Guns, which was on the New Jersey record. Tell me what you found on this track that made it different.
Bagpipes.
Bagpipes?
Yep.
Bagpipes.
Yep. So,
right.
And also these mixes.
You know, I vaguely remember a bagpipe player on the New Jersey record with Bruce Fairburn. We were thinking AC/DC did it. Let's try it.
Exactly.
But
Long
they were
way
so
to the top.
out of tune. I remember thinking, how do you tune these things? And back in those days, you know, you didn't have tricks like to tune bagpipes. So we threw the old bag out.
What's the difference between a trampoline and bagpipes?
You can jump on the trampoline.
No, you take your shoes off to jump on the trampoline. It's an old joke.
All right, so you see bagpipes on Stick to Your Guns.
And, of course, it goes to the very end. So the song fades out. There could be another 2 minutes.
Yeah, well, because the bag's full of air. And the guy's squeezing it.
So I let stuff go. There's a lot of vocals that people have never heard because you kept singing, but the song fades out on the record.
Wow.
And you know, we got to reimagine these mixes a bit because when they were made, if you did a record in the 80s, you're making the decision comes down to what the producer and the artist go, that's going to be...
That's the sound.
That's the sound.
Yeah.
And you're making a record for radio. It's all about radio.
Yeah.
Where you do the hot AC mixes or, you know, whatever. But now I can just put those tracks up. You reimagine them a little bit. You treat the drums a little bit different. And then you bring out all these little pieces that no one have ever heard.
I love that.
And that's the most fun I've had with any of these things, is doing these 2024 mixes.
Yeah, that is fun. Something different. All right, well, from the album New Jersey, with bagpipes, real ones, real bagpipes.
That's right.
Stick to Your Guns. Now, this one we could talk about for an hour and a half.
Yes, we could.
So in 1990, I wrote the Blaze of Glory album for the movie Young Guns. And I was fortunate enough that it seemed like anybody I called to play on the record would show up. And it was a ridiculous band because Elton John played the piano and Kenny Aronoff was the drummer and a guy named Bob Glaub was playing bass and Waddy Wachtel was one of the guitar players. Danny Korchmar co-produced it with me. Of course, he was an incredible guitar player as well. And then a guy named Jeff Beck. The one, the only Jeff Beck.
The only.
We called Jeff Beck out of the blue and said, "Excuse me, sir, would you be at all interested in playing on this record and just coming in and doing all the solos and the fills and, you know, and participating in this record?" And he says, "Yeah, I'd like that." So he came over to Los Angeles where I was doing the record, and we were, you know, so worried about just what can we do for him, what can we get him, what does he need, how does that sound happen with, and he says, "Oh no, just rent me a Marshall and get Fender to send any Stratocaster over." So a cardboard box shows up with a mint green Stratocaster. I don't think there was more than 2 Marshall heads that he said, this one, not that one, and the magic was all in his fingers. So as we sat in the control room and the track itself was already recorded, all you do when a guy like Jeff Beck plays is you just shut up. You know, you don't give Jeff Beck direction. You press the red button, which meant he was recording. Now, what happened from there is absolutely just magic. So take it from there, Obie, and tell me how you stumbled on this and why any Jeff Beck fan is going to be very happy to know.
Okay, so back then you called me to come out there.
Mm-hmm.
You said, you should come out and work with Jeff.
Yep.
Because none of us know what a camshaft is. And
we knew how to make him. That's right. Go on. Tell the background of that.
So he's a hot rod guy. Not just buying one from like one of those shows for $300,000.
No.
He builds them at his place. Has a lift in his shop, the whole 9 yards. And you said, he's great, but I don't think he's bonding with anybody because it's like...
Everyone was in awe.
Yeah.
And everyone wanted to talk about all the records, and that was the last thing he wanted to talk about.
Right. And I didn't want to talk about that. I wanted to talk about hot rods.
Hot rods and movies.
So, like, I ended up in Studio C at Old A&M, which became John Shanks's room where you did
so many records.
Tons of records.
Right.
But I'm in there, and I'm just listening to track after track of this great guitar playing.
Yeah.
Again, the record at the end, you're going, okay, here's what I want to hear on it. Again, you're making a record mix.
Right.
Right? So it's a different animal. By the way, I don't know if you remember, but in my basement, I have a picture of me and Jeff Beck at his 32 Deuce Roadster that he had. He kept that one out in L.A. and they brought it to the studio. And then that first day, I was going to work with him in C. We were just going to listen to the stuff he recorded. He goes, "You want to go out for a ride?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And we're driving down Sunset Boulevard in his red Deuce Roadster. And I bought one of those little Kodak cameras. Remember, they were cardboard?
Sure.
And he let me drive his car coming back. So as he would like look away, I would like take a picture. As long as he wasn't like, I waited till he turned his head. But I have that picture in my basement of he and I at A&M Studios.
Amen.
You know,
Out
iconic
front.
place.
Yeah.
So I went, I bet you there was a lot of stuff that got by.
Yeah.
Because you
He
couldn't
just
use
played.
it in a radio mix.
Yeah.
And as soon as I put up the first track, I was like, so
Treasure.
this is a whole different take.
Yeah.
Because he starts the song now.
Yeah.
Just this like groove thing.
Yeah.
And then bass falls in, drums fall in, and there's quite a bit of Jeff Beck, who is just...
Jeff Beck.
He's one of those guys who's uncopyable.
Correct.
You hear people emulating Jimi Hendrix, or
David Gilmour.
Oh yeah, any of the
Eddie
great
Van
guitar
Halen,
players.
Jimmy
yeah.
Page.
But Jeff Beck,
Clapton.
you can't copy.
It's the fingers.
It's the fingers. And he's playing with that whammy bar, pulling it up, not just down, not doing dive bombs, but so every time he plays, it's different. So
every single take was different.
Every single take was different. So he's one of those guys. You don't go out and go, I'm going to play like Jeff Beck because it's too hard. He's uncopyable. But the interplay between, he was brilliant.
Yes.
And he had your vocal up, and then he found his place. And the synergy between your voice and his playing is just ridiculous. No one's ever heard
these versions.
No. And there's a lot of Jeff Beck.
We'd have a whole album of this.
Yeah.
Because he played on every song.
Well, we're me and Mike, what's his last name again?
Lawson.
Yes, that guy. We're going to go through the rest of them.
Good job.
Yeah.
Good job. Yeah, because it would be great for any true Beck fan.
If you're a Jeff Beck fan or you're a fan of amazing, very special guitar playing, this is,
It's for you.
Yep.
Here's the great Jeff Beck on Blaze of Glory. This next track says Keep the Faith 2024. Now, I want to know what's different here than the album track.
There's 2 extra guitar tracks in it, but this one is stripped down. Really stripped down. Very raw. I took most of the stuff off your voice. The drums are stripped down to the actual drums.
Right.
Pulled the rooms back.
Right.
because it's a whole different animal when you make it that raw.
Yeah.
And then I'm able to take your voice, put it way out front, and make that, the way that I heard it when you recorded it.
Yeah, it's true. I do recall the mix on this track, which was the first single, as well as the title of the album, had a lot on it. Yeah, this was the point where digital recording came into play, and it wasn't 24-track analog anymore, and they gave the kids in the kitchen too much sugar. And so
Yes, that's a good way to put it.
We just kept putting stuff on and on and on and on and on until, the poor guy mixing
also,
it.
this has got a second guitar solo that no one's ever heard.
Oh, I like that.
Nobody's ever heard.
Cool.
And it is ripping.
Right on.
Amazing.
So here's Keep the Faith, the extended version, stripped down version, and still a great song. From the 2024 unique Obie O'Brien sessions, Keep the Faith. Always. Now, if memory serves me, we recorded this here in Nashville. At least I remember singing it here in Nashville.
Yeah.
When Music Row had studios in the houses. Peter Collins produced it. It was a song that I had written, and we did a demo with Bob Rock. And didn't care for the way the song turned out, so it was shelved. And then John Kolodner, who was an A&R guy at Geffen Records at the time, not even our own label, he said, that song's a hit. You should re-record it. And fortunately for us, I listened, and Pete Collins came in, and that was his kind of audition, Always and Someday I'll Be Saturday Night. So if memory serves me, we may have worked on the track in New Jersey sort of as a demo, where when the piano was up in the living room and we had to run a snake down through the, into the basement, down the stairs and around the refrigerator and all that kind of stuff. And then we went to Nashville to make the record. At least that's my recollection. So what's different about this version?
Okay. So I will tell you, the idea for this one came to me because of the Beatles' Naked, where they did the Naked version, where they took everything off, all the strings and the horns, and they made the record as they had envisioned it, like, Paul's playing piano and Lennon plays bass on one song, and all it is those couple instruments. So I went back to Always, because I've always loved the song. And I know the fans loved it. And I said, we're going to strip it down to nothing. So it's basically one acoustic guitar, one electric guitar, the piano, bass, and you.
Oh.
And it becomes an entirely different song when you strip it down, and it's just more raw. And I think you're impacted by the narrative a little bit more when you're out front, and there's not a lot of stuff on your voice, and it's just as if this band we're playing it in the studio, in the room.
Got it. Oh, well, that's good. Well, for your listening pleasure and mine, here is a big one from the Crossroads record called Always. So from the These Days record, this is called Something for the Pain. And I did hear this and really liked it because I think I like this version of it more than the record version. Tell them about the changes that you found in this one.
So again, there's all this sitar droning stuff in the beginning.
Yeah.
That didn't make it to the record. And then different guitar parts, right? So
yeah.
And then it goes through, and there's, again, reimagining, stripping the drums down, making them a little more in your face, so I could do the same thing to your voice. And then when you start doing these mixes, right, when you change one or two little things, it really does change everything. But on this one, after you were about 30 seconds going after the song has faded out on the album, there's this big drum fill that Tico does, one of those like crazy drum fills, double bass drum and all this stuff. And then a lyric comes in that I never heard before. And you sang a chorus, the last chorus on that thing. I've never heard those lyrics. I never even asked you where they came from.
I don't know.
Or if that's what the song originally was going to be.
Yeah, I don't know.
But
I think that song took a little bit of work to get it right. So that very well might have been more the working lyric, and then we figured out what the right chorus was meant to be. But yeah, this one too. This was a work song, but it was worth the effort. It was worth the effort, and you did a great job with the mix and stripping down and finding unique stuff on it.
This had, you're talking about out-of-tune bagpipes. This one has accordion on it.
Nice.
And again, it's not perfectly in tune. And, I'm not going to say anything about, the accordion because my wife's uncle's an accordion player. Sorry, Uncle Joe.
An accomplished one.
Yeah, it's very accomplished.
That.
So I'm not going to do the joke about the trampoline and accordion.
Here's something for the pain.
What do you got? One of my top 10 favorite Bon Jovi songs. And I got to go in and make a mix so it sounded the way I wanted to make it sound. Nothing more fun than that. We took some guitars from the demo, mixed it in with some of the guitars from the actual session. And here's the thing about that song. Phil X is playing on it.
That's right.
And Richie came in and played the solo, but Phil's playing. And it's not the first time we had used Phil before he became a band member. He also played on the song Leave On for the album Two Rooms, which celebrated the works of Elton John and Bertie Taupin. So here it is. What do you got? If you ain't got love.